Beryl is a middle-aged swordsman who runs a dojo in the middle of nowhere and lives a peaceful life. One day while he is training, his father turns to him and says he really wishes he had some grandkids to look after. It's been years since Beryl took over as the instructor here, but he still is maidenless as he was before. Beryl says he's been too busy with the family dojo to think about having kids, but his dad still wants him to at least try. He even suggests that Beryl should try raising up one of his female students so he can get married, but for ethical reasons he refuses. This dojo has been in Beryl's family for generations, and he has been diligently working as the instructor here ever since he took over from his father. Once he dreamed of achieving great things, like becoming a famous swordmaster. But while he is definitely a better swordsman than the average person, he doesn't think his skills are worthy of the Swordmaster title. With that said, he thinks of himself as a good teacher, since many of his students have gone on to become successful swordsmen after graduating. Once practice is over for the day, Beryl goes home to have dinner with his parents. But his dad is still insisting that he get married already. Beryl's dad tries to get his wife friend to pressure Beryl into finding a wife, but she says these things take time, so there's no need to rush him. However, she is still expecting Beryl to give her a grandbaby. Beryl chokes on his food a little because that's a lot easier said than done, especially since he doesn't even have a girlfriend yet. And it's not like a pretty girl is just going to show up at his door. A few seconds later, there's a knock at the door, and Beryl opens it to find a pretty girl standing there. She greets him as her master, and after taking a closer look at her, Beryl realizes that she's one of his former students, Alucia Citrus. Beryl invites her inside and offers her a cup of tea so they can catch up. Beryl remembers Alucia being a gifted student back when he trained her, but he never could have expected that she would become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Anyway, Beryl asks her why she came to visit, so Alucia explains that part of her duty as Knight Commander is to train new recruits, so she took it upon herself to recommend Beryl as a special sword instructor. She even got approved as an Imperial Order, so she came to inform Beryl of the good news. Beryl never asked to become an Imperial instructor, so he considers declining the offer, but his dad tells him that people can get executed for disobeying an Imperial Order, so he can't just ignore it. Alucia assures Beryl that he won't be killed if he refuses the offer, but he would probably face severe consequences for it, so he had better just go along with it. She already has a carriage waiting to take them to the capital, so they can leave now, and tomorrow she'll give him the details of his new job. Beryl can't believe Alucia expects him to leave right now, but his dad is already on board with the idea, so he wishes Beryl good luck and tells him to find a wife for himself while he's in the capital. In fact, he says Alucia would make a great wife for Beryl, but Beryl tells him to stop saying stuff like that because it's making Alucia uncomfortable. There's way too much of an age gap for him and Alucia to become a couple, but Alucia mumbles under her breath that she wouldn't mind. Anyway, Beryl doesn't want to find out what the severe consequences are, so he agrees to the offer and accompanies Alucia to the capital. While the two of them are sitting in the carriage, Beryl notices that Alucia is still using the sword he gifted to her. This is a sword Beryl gives to all the students that graduate from his dojo, and Alucia has taken special care of hers ever since she got it. Beryl is glad to see that she values his gift so much, but he doesn't think that sword is good enough for a knight commander like herself to use. He says she could find something better at any other blacksmith. But Alucia says this sword is the perfect one for her. Beryl assumes she must be so attached to that sword because as her former master, she still believes that anything she gets from Beryl is superior, but he is just an ordinary swordsman, so he'd never be able to cut it as a special instructor. Just then, Alucia speaks up and says she is so excited that the hillbilly Swordmaster is finally coming to the capital. Beryl has no idea who she's talking about because he's not a hillbilly and he's definitely not a swordmaster, but she tells him that he is well known in the world of swordsmanship. He has trained dozens of students who went on to become legendary swordsmen and adventurers, so he's a bit of a living legend, although Alucia isn't happy with the nickname he got. Beryl finds the story interesting, but he's convinced that Alucia is the only one who thinks of him as a swordmaster. Soon they arrive at the royal capital, so Alucia drops Beryl off at an inn so he can rest, and she says she'll come pick him up tomorrow morning. The next day, Alucia takes Beryl to the castle and introduces him to the Knight's Order. She informs all the recruits that Beryl is so strong that even she would be no match for him, so they should feel honored to have such a skilled man as their teacher. However, a couple of the knights don't think Beryl deserves to be in such a high position, and one of them is particularly unhappy about this. A little while later, Beryl is talking with Alucia in the halls, and she's congratulating him for officially becoming a special instructor. She tells him only needs to come in to train the recruits 3 or 4 times a month, so it shouldn't interfere too much with his usual lessons at the dojo. Just then, a girl comes running up to Beryl, and she's so excited to see her master again that she can hardly contain herself. Her name is Karuni, and she was a student at Beryl's dojo 2 years ago. He recalls that her dream was to join the Knight's Order, so he's glad to see that she actually made it happen. Although Kuruni is still only a trainee, so she's still got a lot of work to do before she can become a proper knight. With that said, she is happy that she'll get to train under Beryl again, and the same goes for Lucia. Later that day, Beryl returns to his home, but as he opens the door, he finds that yet another one of his students has come to pay him a visit. His name is Randrid, and he came to introduce Beryl to his wife and newborn child. Beryl is happy to see that Randrid is doing well, but his father cuts him off and says Beryl shouldn't bother coming home until he has a wife and kid like Randrid over here. Speaking of Randrid, after graduating from Beryl's dojo, he went on to become a platinum rank adventurer, but now that he has a child, he wants to retire and move back into the village. Platinum rank is pretty hard to achieve, so Beryl is surprised that Randrid is willing to give it up so easily. But that again, being an adventurer is dangerous works, so he probably doesn't want to risk it while he has a child to take care of. While he's here, Randrid promises to do his best to run the dojo, but Beryl has no idea what he's talking about. Beryl's father tells him that since Randrid is decently skilled, he can take over as the dojo's instructor, and that means Beryl won't have to stay here anymore. So his father is kicking him out, even though Beryl owns this house. The next day, Beryl explains the whole situation to Lucia and explains that he needs to find a house here in the city. The inn he slept at yesterday was a little too luxurious for him to stay there permanently, so he wants to find a place that's more affordable, and Lucia is more than happy to help him look. She asks him if he'd like to come and live at her house, but Beryl doesn't think that would be appropriate, so much to Lucia's disappointment, he turns her down. Lucia then asks him if he would like to get some food with her since it's lunchtime, and Beryl is fine with that, so they start heading for a restaurant. However, while they are walking, someone calls Lucia Shingles for walking around town with a man and calling him master without a second thought. The girl and Lucia seem to have an unpleasant history together, and the girl thinks it is outrageous that a proud knight commander would be running around with a random man. Beryl has been trying to hide his face so he can avoid conflict, but the girl wants to see his face, so she pulls the map down, and as soon as she recognizes Beryl, she calls him master too. Beryl is confused by this because he has no idea who she is, so she reminds him that her name is Serena, and he once saved her and taught her how to use a sword. It takes a while for Beryl to remember, but he eventually recalls finding an injured girl 20 years ago. He took her and nursed her back to health and eventually taught her how to fight, but he hadn't seen her in over a decade, so he's pleasantly surprised to see that she's a black rank adventurer. Serena apologizes for not visiting Beryl all these years, but she's also curious as to why he is suddenly in the royal capital. Lucia explains that Beryl has been appointed as a special instructor for the Knight's Order, so he is moving to the capital, and she is here to help him find a suitable inn. However, Serena says she'd be much better at finding accommodations because as an adventurer, she was used to staying in inns. Serena and Lucia start arguing over who gets to go house hunting with Beryl, and Beryl has no idea why the two hate each other so much, but with their help, he eventually manages to find an inn that suits him. He thanks both of them for their help, but he asks them to please stop arguing with each other for his sake, because he can't listen to any more yelling. Out of respect for Beryl, the two of them stop arguing with one another and quietly walk home. Beryl watches them from a window, and while he can't say he will enjoy all the excitement of city life, he thinks it's nice that he will have so many of his students around to take care of him. The next day, the Knight's Order is training as usual, and the vice commander, Henbritz, is absolutely dominating all the others with his skill. After defeating his aspiring partner, Lucia suddenly makes an announcement and informs everyone that there has been a change to the schedule. Instead of once a week, Beryl will be instructing them starting today, so she expects them to work harder than ever before. Beryl tells them all that he's happy to be here, but before he can begin his first lesson, Henbritz approaches and says he has something to say. To be a special instructor for the Knight's Order, Beryl would need to possess a certain level of strength, so he is challenging him to a duel. Henbritz isn't trying to be disrespectful. He simply wants to make sure that Beryl is good enough for the position, and as the vice commander, he is within his rights to ask for a duel, so Lucia sanctions it. Beryl really wishes she would stop agreeing to things on his behalf. But since Henbritz challenged him, he has no choice but to get ready for the duel. Henbritz is sure that Lucia only thinks highly of Beryl because he was her instructor when she was a kid. But that doesn't mean Beryl is cut out to be a special instructor for the Knight Order, so Henbritz is going to prove that by defeating Beryl right now. Beryl agrees with Henbritz because he doesn't think he's good enough for this job, but it would look bad for Lucia if the man she recommended lost easily, so he decides to do his best against Henbritz. The duel commences and Henbritz charges in to attack Beryl. Beryl begins parrying the attacks, and he is amazed by the sheer power and speed that Henbritz possesses. But he knows that if he can deflect one of the strikes just right, then it will leave Henbritz wide open and he can close in for a strike. That's exactly what he does, and Henbritz is left speechless because in a real battle he definitely would have died just now. That counts as a point for Beryl, so the two of them return to their starting positions and Henbritz begins attacking again. Beryl still can't believe how strong Henbritz is, but all his moves are predictable, so it was pretty easy for him to parry. Henbritz realizes he won't hit Beryl if he doesn't go all out, so he uses his signature move to attack. The Roaring Blade technique has so much power behind it that it can't be blocked or parried, so there should be no way for Beryl to win here. However, after Henbritz swings his sword, Beryl disappears and reappears behind him with his sword next to Henbritz's neck. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, and Henbritz isn't even mad about it. He is just amazed by the skill Beryl just displayed, and he apologizes for being so rude earlier. Later on, Henbritz holds a party to welcome Beryl as the new instructor, but he still really wants to know how Beryl managed to counter his signature spin move. Beryl explains that all he did was move along with Henbritz's rotation, which is how he ended up behind him, but doing it is a lot harder than Beryl makes it sound. In any case, Henbritz is looking forward to training under Beryl, and so are the others. The story continues. A week has passed since Beryl became an instructor here, and while two of the knights are practicing together, he comes over to give them some advice. He's been watching how they fight and their sword play is decent, but he thinks they need to work on their distance. He demonstrates that if you focus too much on watching your opponent's sword, then your opponent can get closer without you noticing. It may not seem like much, but in a real sword fight, half a step of distance can be the difference between winning and losing. Beryl thought he was just giving basic advice to his students, but with how everyone is looking at him, you would think he just spit the greatest bars of all time. Ever since Beryl's duel with Henblitz, the knights have treated every word Beryl says as gospel, and he has to admit that it has made his job a lot easier. Once practice is over for the day, Beryl sits down to relax, and Henblitz hands him a towel to wipe his sweat with. A few minutes later, Kuruni approaches Beryl and asks him if he has any plans after this. Beryl wasn't really planning to do anything, so Kuruni asks him if he would like her to show him around town. Now that Beryl thinks about it, he hasn't had a chance to see much of Baltrain yet, so he takes Kuruni up on the offer, and she excitedly runs off to go change her clothes. Meanwhile, Alucia is busy meeting with the royal officials to give them a report on the state of the Knight's Order, especially with the new special instructor who was hired recently. Alucia assures them that Beryl has exceeded all expectations, and since there is nothing more to discuss, the meeting comes to a close. People had warned her that if she wanted to continue developing her swordsmanship, she should avoid becoming knight captain because of all the bureaucracy. The only reason she took this job was because she needed a position of power to bring Beryl to the capital. Back when Alucia was still a kid, her parents brought her to Beryl's dojo so she could learn how to defend herself, and from the moment she met Beryl, she knew he was a kind person. After she joined the dojo, Beryl had her practice her sword swings and jump across tree stumps to train her mobility. He also had her do some basic strength training, and while his methods may have been a little unorthodox before long, Alucia felt very comfortable using a sword. One day, Beryl asked Alucia if she would like to have a mock battle with him, and she excitedly agreed because she wanted to show off everything she learned. However, when she actually went up against Beryl, she couldn't find any openings in his stance. Since Alucia grew up learning from Beryl, she thought all sword instructors were as good as he was. But one day, when Beryl took them out to participate in a mock battle against another dojo, she realized she was wrong. The person she was up against was full openings and had the patience of a toddler because he blindly attacked Alucia without a plan. As expected, Alucia mopped the floor with him, and it was barely even a challenge for her. Once the mock battle is over, Beryl and his students start walking back to their dojo, and Beryl is glad that his students got a chance to face people who had different fighting styles. Speaking of which, Alucia asked Beryl if his dojo happens to be better than average compared to the others, but he doesn't like to think of it that way. Sure, they may have won the mock battle today, but it's more important to focus on what you learned from the experience rather than whether you win or lose. Alucia understands the point Beryl is trying to make, but then she notices that her hairpin is missing. She realizes she must have dropped it back at the dojo, and it's really important to her, so she tells Beryl that she's going back to get it. Alucia eventually arrives back at the other dojo, so she starts looking for the hairpin she dropped, but unfortunately it looks like the guy she defeated found it before she did. For a second, it looked like he was going to be nice and hand over without causing trouble, but that would make too much sense. Instead, he throws the hairpin into the dojo and says Alucia is going to have to take all of them at once if she wants to get her pin back. She may have beaten him in the mock battle, but there's no way he can lose when he has all his friends backing him up. Considering how trash their sword skills were earlier, Alucia might have a good chance of beating them all on her own. But she knows Beryl wouldn't want her to use her skills to beat other people up, so she just stood and was totally ready to get clobbered. However, before the jerk could smack her face, Beryl steps in front of Alucia and takes the hit instead. The strike did no damage to him, but it still hurt a little, so he asks the boys if this is really how they want to use their swordsmanship. The jerk still doesn't understand that what he is doing is messed up, so he tries to strike Beryl on the head this time. However, Beryl easily ducks down and disarms the jerk in one swift motion. He then goes on to parry a bunch of the jerk's friends, but before things get any worse, the master of this dojo shows up. He heard a commotion and ran over as soon as he could, but he's very disappointed to see his students behaving in such an uncivilized manner. He kneels down to sincerely apologize to Beryl and promises to make sure this never happens again. Beryl and Alucia begin walking home together, and Beryl explains that he got a bad feeling when Alucia went to get her hairpin, so he followed her to make sure she was alright. Alucia feels bad because Beryl got hit because of her, but he tells her the hit wasn't that bad. And besides, she didn't do anything wrong, so she doesn't need to blame herself for what happened. If anything, he thinks this was his fault because as Alucia's teacher, he shouldn't have let her go alone into a potentially dangerous situation. Years go by and Alucia is in the middle of another mock battle with Beryl. Beryl's form is still as solid as ever, but this time, as he swings his sword, Alucia is able to keep up with him and score a point against Beryl for once. Beryl is surprised by how much Alucia had improved, but he believes she is finally ready to graduate from his dojo, so he presents her with her ceremonial graduation sword. By now, Alucia had come to realize that Beryl was ignorant of how godly his sword skills are, and she really didn't want to leave his dojo because there was still so much she could learn from him. But at the same time, she didn't want to cause trouble for Beryl, so she didn't argue with him over it. Instead, she set out to prove that Beryl's techniques are superior to all others, so she enrolled in the Knight's Order program and took the entrance test. And just as she expected during the test, none of her fellow candidates were a match for the training Beryl gave her. Even the examiners couldn't keep up with her, so they would never stand a chance against Beryl. He possesses near-inhuman reaction time and observational skills that far exceed any normal person. So there's no doubt in Alucia's mind that Beryl is the greatest swordsman in the world. However, Beryl isn't aware of his skill, and knowing him, he would happily live out the rest of his days as an unknown swordmaster. But Alucia refused to let her master remain unrecognized. With her skills, she slowly rose through the ranks of the Knight's Order in hopes of gaining the power to support Beryl, and by the time she finally acquired the position of Knight Commander, it had been 10 years since she left Beryl's dojo. And in that time, Beryl became even more amazing than she remembered him to be. She feels a little guilty about appointing him as an instructor without asking first, but it was the only way she could get him to leave the village and gain some recognition. She returns to the training hall and meets with Henblitz to ask how training with Beryl went. Henblitz tells her that it was amazing, and that they all learned so much for him today. Alucia doesn't see Beryl around, so she asks if he already went home for the day, but Henblitz tells her he actually left with Karuni because she said she wanted to show him around town. Alucia gets a little jealous after hearing that because it means Karuni basically asked Beryl out on a date and she wishes she had thought of it first. Meanwhile, on Beryl and Karuni's date, she's showing him all the wonderful shops they have in town, and Beryl is amazed by how lively this place is compared to his village. Although he wonders why Karuni brought him to the Western District, since all the tourist attractions like the Church Palace are meant to be in the Northern District. Karuni says he is right, but once you've lived in the city for long enough, you see the palace and church all the time, so it gets kind of boring after a while. But Beryl was actually looking forward to seeing it though. While they are still walking through the market, Beryl hears someone call out to him, so he turns and finds this girl walking towards him. She is calling him master, so she must have been one of his students, but he has no idea who she is. She also seems to be good friends with Karuni, but he still can't remember who she is. The girl is disappointed that her master has forgotten about her, so she points to her sword to remind him that she was one of his graduates. Beryl thinks about it for a few more seconds, and he finally remembers where he has seen the girl before. Her name is Ficelle, and she was indeed one of his students. She spent 2 years training alongside Karuni, although she looked a lot different back then. It has been 5 years since Beryl saw her, so she was bound to grown up a lot since then. And she's been doing pretty well for herself in the capital, because she is now the ace of the Magic Corps. Beryl is happy to hear that she is doing well, but he's a bit surprised that she joined the Magic Corps because he doesn't remember teaching her anything about magic. Karuni asks Feis if she's here to do some shopping, so she explains that she came to buy some magic accessories. Beryl has never heard of magic accessories before, so Feis picks one up and explains that it allows anyone to use magic. Although she is capable of using magic without any accessories, Beryl is surprised that Feis can really use magic on her own. Then again, she did say she is part of the magic corps, so it makes sense. Just then, Beryl hears a woman scream because her purse just got snatched. As soon as he sees this, Beryl gets ready to chase the guy down, but before he does anything, Feist tells him he can let her handle this. She then draws her sword and covers it in magic before slashing in the direction of the thief. Her slash releases a burst of magic energy which ties the thief's legs up, and once he hits the ground, Kuruni apprehends him. Beryl is impressed by how well the two of them handled the situation, especially Ficel's magic, because he has never seen anything like it before. Ficel explains that she basically covers the sword in magic whenever she fights, and Beryl's training is really useful when it comes to adapting the magic for combat, so she is thankful. And Beryl is equally thankful that Ficel is still using all the techniques he taught her. The next morning, Beryl wakes up early to go for a stroll through the city, but while he is walking, he hears someone calling his name. He turns around and finds a little girl standing there, so he asks her if she's lost. The girl yells at him for treating her like a child because she is the head of the magic corps. But Beryl thinks the girl is just playing a game, so he doesn't believe her. The girl is starting to get frustrated by the fact that Beryl doesn't believe her, so she demonstrates her power by spawning a huge fireball from her finger. Beryl finally believes that she is part of the magic corps, but he is surprised that such a little girl could use magic like that. She tells him to stop calling her a little girl. Her name is Lucy, and she's a full-grown adult. Okay, maybe grown is a bit of a stretch, but she's a lot older than Beryl is, so she will not stand for him treating her as a child. Feist told her all about Beryl and how amazing he is, so she wanted to meet him in person. She is sure that Beryl must be an excellent teacher because Ficel's skill with a sword is exceptional. But Beryl says Ficel's success is due to her own hard work, all he did was teach her the basics. Beryl has been walking with Lucy to be polite, but she eventually leads him into a wide open area and any gamer can tell where this is going. Lucy is very fond of her magic, so she trains every day to improve as much as possible. However, she doesn't have anyone worthy to practice with, but since Beryl is a legendary Swordmaster, she thinks he will be a good challenge for her. Before Beryl can even respond, she tries to hit him with a blast of fire, but he jumps back to dodge it in time. Beryl would have preferred to avoid fighting altogether, but with the way Lucy is staring at him, it doesn't look like she will let him go until he gives her a proper fight, so he draws his sword and gets ready to face her. The story continues. We see Lucy launches a massive fireball at Beryl, so he jumps out of the way and starts darting around to evade her attack. Lucy continues throwing fireballs at him, but Beryl is able to dodge and parry everything she shoots at him. So she decides to switch things up and uses ice magic to create 3 ice balls. She throws the ice balls at Beryl, and despite their size, he is easily able to cut the ice in half with one swing of his sword. After seeing what Beryl can do, Lucy is even more invested in this fight, but Beryl wants to end things as soon as possible, so begins charging towards her. He doesn't want to actually hurt her, so he intends to just use the hilt of his sword to knock her out. But just when he gets within striking distance, Lucy covers herself in flame to force Beryl to back away. He had her worried for a second there, because she knows she would get knocked out instantly if she let Beryl get too close. Beryl is really starting to wish he could use magic too, because it's really hard to fight against it with a sword, but Lucy is just getting started. She summons even more fireballs behind Beryl, so he's forced to start running again. Lucy finds him using how Beryl is just running around without a plan, but this is his first time facing a wizard, so he doesn't exactly have a book of strategies for this. The fireballs eventually stop raining down, but just when Beryl thinks he is safe, Lucy drops a massive ice ball on top of him. He spots it in time and parries it back at Lucy, but she is easily able to destroy it with her fire magic. As a result, there is now a layer of mist obstructing her view, so Beryl tries to take advantage of this opening to attack. But Lucy isn't out of tricks yet, and uses lightning magic to knock him back. Beryl hasn't managed to land a solid attack on Lucy yet, but she hasn't landed a hit on Beryl either, and she's starting to get frustrated by it. She was hoping to end this with basic spells, but since Beryl has held out for so long, she decides to use her trump card. Beryl notices her pause for a moment, so he thinks this might be his chance to attack, but a second later he freezes in his tracks because Lucy just summoned a black hole. He isn't exactly sure what that thing is supposed to do, but he can tell that it'll be bad if he rushes in, so he patiently waits for Lucy to make a move. However, she suddenly gives up and dispels her magic. There's no point in continuing the fight if Beryl can maintain his composure like that in the face of a black hole, so she apologizes for taking things too far and says they can end things here for today. Beryl is just relieved that he doesn't have to fight her anymore because it's really nerve-wracking to go up against someone like Lucy. But out of curiosity, he wants to know what would have happened if she decided to launch her spell, and Lucy explains that in theory, the spell should have shredded Beryl's body of pieces. Granted, she can see why Ficelle looks up to Beryl so much because most people who saw that spell would have passed out from fear immediately, and this is the first time she had come across a swordsman like Beryl who could put up such a good fight. That said, she really is sorry for randomly forcing him into a duel, so she tells him to come to the Magic Institution later, and she'll personally make up for all the trouble she caused. Late that day, Beryl heads to the training hall as usual to instruct the students, and while he is on his break, he happens to run to Ficelle in the hallway. She is here to deliver magic healing potions on behalf of the Magic Institute, and she tells Beryl he can have one for himself. He tries to turn her down since healing potions are really expensive, but Feist tells him this one is free as her way of apologizing for what happened with Lucy this morning. Beryl was still half convinced that Lucy was really just a little girl, but Feist explains that Lucy uses magic to keep herself looking young, so no one actually knows how old she is. Even so, Beryl is surprised that Lucy could fit so much power into such a tiny body because he was really worried that he might die when she was attacking him. He never wants to fight another wizard again after what happened, but Feist tells him that Lucy is a special case. Normal wizards can't cast magic continuously like she can, so he would probably be able to beat most wizards in a fight. Just then, Alucia shows up and she tells Beryl that he has just received a special request. He is curious about it, so Alucia leads him to a room where they both meet with Serena. She tells them that the Adventurers Guild would like to hire Beryl to organize some special training for the new adventurers in preparation for their first ascent into a dungeon. Hearing about the new adventurers makes Beryl think back to his younger days when he wanted to be an adventurer. Items found in a dungeon can be pretty valuable, so Beryl was eager to conquer one, but then he got beaten up by monsters on his first day, so he ran home and never attempted adventuring again. He tells the two that he thinks adventuring is a dangerous business. That's exactly why they want him to train the new adventurers. They've already made all the necessary preparations, and it won't interfere with his job as a special instructor here, so there's nothing stopping him. But at the end of the day, Beryl still needs to agree to do the job, so Serena invites him to come to the Adventurers Guild and meet with the Guildmaster to talk about the job. The Adventurers Guild is nearby, so Serena takes Beryl there immediately, and once they arrive, they enter the Guildmaster's office. However, to Beryl's surprise, he finds Lucy sitting on the couch waiting for him. She heard about the job the Adventurers Guild offered him, and since she is good friends with the Guildmaster, she rushed over so she could meet Beryl again. The Guildmaster, Nidus, then introduces himself, and with everything he has heard about Beryl from both Serena and Lucy, he has no doubt that picking him was the right decision. Beryl tries to remind Nidus that he hasn't accepted the job yet, but his words are completely ignored. Nidus points to his assistant Magon and tells Beryl that he can discuss the details of the job with him. But before any of that, Magon wants to clarify something. He asks Beryl if he has any prior experience as an adventurer, and Beryl answers no, so Magon begins to question whether Beryl is really suitable to train new adventurers. Beryl is really happy that Magon said that because now he might not have to accept the job anymore, but Magon's comment pissed off Serena and Lucy since they both already vouched for Beryl, yet Magon is still doubting him. With all due respect, Magon is just looking out for the safety of the adventurers because there have been reports of strange monster behavior recently. Nidus understands the point that Magon is trying to make, so he asks what Beryl would need to do to earn his approval. Magon says that if Beryl can win a duel against the black-ranked Serena, that he will prove himself to be a qualified teacher. That seems simple enough, and since Serena is on board with the idea, much to Beryl's dismay, Nidus says he will organize the duel right away. Before long, Beryl and Serena are both on the training grounds, and a huge crowd has already gathered around them. They are all eager to see who the legendary Serena is going to be fighting, and Serena is equally excited to get to fight her master again. Back when Serena was a little girl, she and her parents were on a trading caravan, but midway through the journey, they were attacked by a beast that tore the carriage to shreds. In a desperate effort to save their daughter, Serena's parents threw her off the nearby cliff, so she was the only one to survive the incident that day. And when she finally woke up, she found Beryl standing over her. He took her back to his house to treat her wounds, and once she was feeling a little better, he started asking her a few questions. He got her to tell him that her name was Serena, but when he asked about her parents, she started having a panic attack, so Beryl told her to just rest up some more until she felt better. Since Serena has nowhere else to go, Beryl asks his parents if they would be willing to let her live here, at least until they can find a new home for her, and his parents agreed. So from that day on, Serena was practically part of the family. At first she was hesitant to open up to them, but then one morning she happened to see Beryl training with his sword. Beryl could tell that she was intrigued, so he asked her if she wanted to join him. Serena then began training with Beryl every chance she could get, and as he taught her the basics of swordsmanship, the two of them bonded a lot. As a result, Serena became more outgoing. And one morning, as Beryl was getting ready to be in classes at his dojo, he saw Serena waiting outside with her sword in hand, so he invited her to join in. Serena took her sword training very seriously, and she would have loved to stay with Beryl's family forever. But eventually a family came along who were willing to adopt her, so Beryl and his parents encouraged her to go with them because that's what they thought was best for her. Serena really didn't want to leave, but at the same time she didn't want to cause trouble for Beryl, so she thanked him for everything he had done for her and they went their separate ways. A few years after that, Serena had already become a gold-rank adventurer and she was out on an escort mission when the caravan was suddenly attacked by a group of bandits. The leader of the bandits was known to be a dangerously skilled swordsman, so her teammate warned her to be careful. But before he knew it, Serena had already jumped into the air to attack the bandits, and before long they were all unconscious on the ground. There are two main reasons that Serena chose to become an adventurer. One, because she wants to prevent as many tragedies as possible, so no one has to go through what she did. And secondly, she wants to put all the skills that Beryl taught her to good use. So now that she has the chance to face Beryl again after 20 years, she plans to show him just how much she has improved since he last saw her. Beryl isn't exactly thrilled about this duel, but he can see how excited Serena is, so as her master, it is his duty to give her a good fight. As the duel begins, Serena charges forward and starts attacking Beryl with a relentless barrage of sword strikes. She's incredibly fast, but Beryl is still able to keep up with her attacks, so she can't land a single hit. Serena is overjoyed by how this fight is turning out because it has been so long since she was able to fight someone at full strength without needing to worry about hurting them. And Beryl is pleased to see that Serena has grown so much in strength since the last time he saw her. He can tell that she has been diligently training non-stop to get to her current skill level, but she still isn't perfect yet because he has identified a flaw in her combat style. Her attacks with her left hand are a little stiff, so Beryl is able to stick his sword through the handle of hers and disarm her. Serena tries to counter him with her other sword, but in the process, Beryl sweeps her leg and points his sword to her neck while she's on the ground. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, so the others come down to congratulate him on his victory, and Megan sincerely apologizes for doubting Beryl's skill. Beryl tells him there's no need to apologize since it's normal to be skeptical of a teacher whom you have never seen before, but now that he is satisfied with Beryl's skill, there's nothing stopping Beryl from becoming a special instructor here. The next day, Beryl meets with the adventurer's students in front of a dungeon, and their names are Porta, Nidri, and Sarlacats. As they step into the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch warns him that there are 6 monsters up ahead, so everyone gets ready for battle. Beryl and Serena are just here to make sure nothing bad happens, so they sit back and let the kids handle the fighting, and when they clash with the first set of goblins, they are able to defeat them in record time. The group continues to move forward, and before long they have finished exploring the dungeon without any major incidents occurring, so they all head back to the entrance. Once they return to town, the training will be complete, but Beryl finds it strange that there weren't many monsters in the dungeon. Just then, as Porta is about to leave the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch detects something so powerful that it shatters, and Beryl yells out for Porta to stop, but it was already too late. Lil Bro got snatched. Porta is still alive, but he is badly wounded and needs immediate medical attention. However, Beryl and Serena won't be able to help him until they've taken down the monster, and that's not going to be an easy task. This monster is a specially designated target called a Xenograble, and it is so strong that even the best adventurers would stand no chance, but the two of them have no choice but to fight it. The story continues. We see Beryl really wishes he hadn't come on this mission, but at least he has Serena with him, and since she's a black rank adventurer, she should be able to handle the griffin. And while she's doing that, Beryl plans to go help Ponta, but as he stretches his hand out to ask for a healing potion, Serena dabs him up and says she's going to help Ponta instead. Beryl doesn't even have time to respond before the griffin suddenly attacks him, so he rolls out of the way, and now he has no choice but to fight. As the griffin tries to claw at him, Beryl skillfully parries its strikes with his sword, and when an opportunity presents itself, he goes straight for the griffin's legs. Unfortunately, the scales around its legs are rock hard, so Beryl's slash did no damage. It's basically stuck playing defense here, but he needs to do his best in order to buy time for Serena to get Ponta to safety. However, while he was checking on Serena, he let his guard down for a brief moment, which almost cost him his life. Luckily, he was able to block it in time, but he still got cut pretty badly, so he needs to find a way to take this thing down before it takes him out. In situations like this, Beryl would usually focus his attacks on the monster's head, but because it can breathe fire, he will never be able to get close enough in a frontal assault. Instead, Beryl decides to attack it from the side, but the griffin spots him and counters with a tail swipe. Yet Beryl still manages to recover and slashes the griffin's tail off in one swing. This enrages the griffin, so it shoots a massive fireball at Beryl, who is forced to jump back. He already knew that cutting off its tail would send the griffin into a frenzy, but he didn't expect it to charge straight at him. It rams its head into Beryl's body, but while it definitely hurt, Beryl is still okay, so he repositions himself and decides to just wait out the tantrum. However, that's easier said than done, because while Beryl is still clinging onto its back, the griffin takes off and starts flying straight up. A fall from this height would be fatal for Beryl, so he holds on with everything he's got, but that just makes the griffin even angrier. It eventually returns to the ground, so Beryl jumps off his back, but now the griffin isn't holding back anymore. It uses its magic to keep the ground around it and turn ground into lava, forcing Beryl to stand on a rock to avoid being burned alive. But Beryl isn't the only one in danger of burning because the lava is flowing into the caves, and it's only a matter of time before the kids inside die from the heat. Beryl hears them screaming for help, and he doesn't have time to worry about his own safety anymore, so he starts running across the lava to attack, and for now, his boots are keeping him safe. However, as he clashes with the griffin, he still can't seem to make any progress against its hard body. The griffin starts shooting more fireballs at him, so he now has to run and dodge across the lava. As a result of one of the fireball explosions, Beryl is launched into the air, but he uses that to his advantage and stabs the griffin in its eye. The griffin screeches in agony and knocks Beryl away, and the good news is that Beryl's sword is still in its eye, so it can't see anymore. But the bad news is that Beryl no longer has a blade to fight or parry with, and the griffin looks like it's about to unleash hell on him. Just then, something gets the griffin's attention, so it looks up and there we see Serena jumping from a cliff with blades in hand to finish the griffin off. She slams into down at full speed, knocking it to the ground, and before the griffin could retaliate, she slashes its neck, killing it once and for all. Serena nemesis Beryl's broken sword in the griffin's eye, and she apologizes since this wouldn't have happened if she had come to help him sooner. Beryl tells her she doesn't need to worry about it. Besides, he is much more concerned about the trainees. Just then, the kids make their way out of the cave, and miraculously, they didn't suffer any major burns, so everything worked out fine in the end. The group heads back to the Adventurers Guild to report what happened to the Guildmaster, and he's shocked to hear that Beryl and Serena managed to defeat a named monster. Serena tells him that if Beryl hadn't graciously agreed to accompany them on the mission, she would have most certainly died against the griffin. Beryl tries to mention that Serena was the one who dealt the final blow, but she isn't interested in taking any credit for this. The Guildmaster praises Beryl for doing such a good job and promises to repay him for this someday, but in the meantime, he asked Beryl if he would be interested in becoming an adventurer, but Beryl immediately shuts that idea down. After that, he and Serena head outside, and Serena apologizes once more because the only reason Beryl got roped into all this was because she was bragging about his strength to everyone. Beryl tells her he doesn't mind, although he still doesn't think he's worthy of all the praise he has been getting. Even so, Serena tells him he was really strong and she is glad that she got a chance to fight alongside him in a life or death battle. Beryl thanks her as well because all the decisions Serena made were spot on, which is why they were all able to make it back alive. Serena is happy to hear Beryl praising her, but she doesn't think she deserves it. However, Beryl tells her she has earned every bit of his praise because she grew up to be an amazing adventurer. The next day, Beryl gets up early because he needs to do something about his broken sword, but he still doesn't know much about the capital, so he asks Karuni to guide him to a blacksmith shop. He thanks her for agreeing to his request on such short notice, but she was planning to go to a blacksmith anyway, so this is no trouble at all. Alucia also decided to tag along, but definitely not because she's jealous. She says she's here because choosing a sword is an important decision, and she wants to help Beryl make the best choice possible. But the truth is, she already missed all of her chances to go on a date with Beryl, so she can't let this opportunity slip through her fingers as well. They eventually arrive at the blacksmith, and the owner comes out to greet Karuni. Just then, he notices Beryl and he is shocked to see his master here of all places. Balder used to be one of Beryl's students years ago, and in case you're wondering, yes, he is older than Beryl. In fact, he was the oldest student Beryl ever trained at the time, and the whole reason he trained at Beryl's dojo was because he thought it would be important to know how to use a sword if he wanted to become a good blacksmith. Even so, he always took Beryl's lessons seriously, and by the looks of it, he was able to achieve his dream of becoming a blacksmith. Since everyone is here, Balder asks what he can do for them, so Karuni goes first and says she needs to have her short sword sharpened. Balder says he'd be happy to help, so he asks her to show it to him. Karuni hands over her sword, and Balder takes a long hard look at it, but after a few moments he drops it and tells her there's nothing he can do here because she's ruined the sword. Alucia thinks it's weird that Karuni ruined her sword since she's usually very precise when practicing. But if that's the case, then there's only one explanation for the state of the sword. Beryl turns to Kuruni and asks her how it feels when she holds the short sword. She thinks about it and tells him the sword feels light, but as soon as Beryl and Balder hear that, they know exactly what's wrong. They tell her that she isn't suited to use the short sword because if you can't feel the weight of your weapon, then you won't be able to wield it properly. With that said, they'll need to find a new sword for her, and Beryl thinks a two-handed greatsword might be a good fit. Kuruni is small, but she's also very strong, so she shouldn't have much trouble handling the weight. He asks Kuruni to try holding it, and it's a lot heavier than what she's used to, but it's not too heavy, so she should be able to swing it easily in combat. She decides to buy it since Beryl is the one who recommended it to her, and she likes how cool it looks when she carries it on her back. Now that Kuruni is done with her shopping, Beryl decides to start looking for a new sword for himself from Balder's collection, but Alucia insists that a swordsman of his caliber should have a sword custom made. Beryl doesn't think it's necessary to go that far, since the swords here should be more than good enough. But while he's still looking, Serena walks in with a huge sack. As soon as Alucia and Serena spot lock eyes, they start arguing because they can't stand each other, but Beryl changes the topic and asks Serena what she's doing here. Serena explains that she came because she has a special job she needs Balder to do. She drops her sack on the front desk and reveals that it's the leg of the griffin she and Beryl killed. She tells Balder that she wants him to make a long sword out of this thing. Balder is amazed because this is the first time he has ever been asked to make a long sword from a named monster corpse, but he wonders why Serena would even want a long sword when she's known for using twin blades. She explains that she actually wants to give the sword to Beryl, but Beryl doesn't think he deserves such a fancy sword. He reminds Serena she was the one who dealt the kill and blow, so she deserves to keep the monster leg for herself, but she insists on gifting him a sword since it's the only way she can make up for the sword Beryl lost. Balder suddenly chimes in and tells Beryl to just accept the gift already, but not because he's on Serena's side, it's because he really wants to try making an awesome sword out of maimed monster parts. Beryl eventually agrees to have a sword made from the monster's leg, but he can already tell by the look on Balder's face that he's going to try something crazy. He reminds Balder that he just wants a regular sword, and Balder promises not to make anything weird. But for some reason, Beryl doesn't trust him. In any case, Balder says it will take a while for him to complete his masterpiece, so he asks for a week, and Beryl has no problem with that time frame. So since all their business here is done, says it's time for them to leave. And as soon as he says this, Kuruni comes up to Beryl and asks for a small favor. Since she just bought a new sword, she's going to need to learn how to use it properly, so she asked Beryl to give her some private lessons. Beryl informs her that a great sword has two main functionalities. First, you can put a lot of force behind your swings. It's best to swing laterally to make good use of your momentum. Secondly, you can hold the sword by the ricasso to make it easier to maneuver. Kuruni tries it out, and it brings back memories because back when she was part of Beryl's dojo, she spent ages learning how to swing her sword properly. Later that night, Beryl is walking home alone, and along the way he notices a child coming his way. Normally he'd think nothing of it, but as they pass each other, she tries reaching into Beryl's jacket to steal his money. Beryl catches her in the act and grabs her arm so she can't get away, but all of a sudden she blasts Beryl with fire magic to distract him. Her plan works because Beryl was forced to let go of her to protect himself. She then runs off into the night and eventually enters a rundown building with a bunch of men gambling inside. As she walks past them, she hands over all the money she successfully stole that night, but the men aren't satisfied with the amount, so they accuse her of slacking off. However, their boss speaks up and tells them to be quiet because Mui would never intentionally do that after all. She knows there'll be consequences if she ever goes against him. Mui's face remains expressionless, but she knows how cruel the boss can be, so she can afford to keep making mistakes. However, she suddenly realizes she made a massive mistake because in her hurry to run away from Beryl, she accidentally dropped her ring on the ground and Beryl just found it. The story continues. We see the next day at the training hall, Kuruni is still practicing with her new great sword, and Henblitz is sparring with Beryl on the other side of the hall. So far he hasn't managed to land a single hit on Beryl yet, so as he charges in for one final strike, he feeds an overhead slash and targets Beryl's abdomen instead. Beryl is impressed by the technique, but he is still able to counter it, so Henblitz loses. Henblitz thanks Beryl for the lesson, and Beryl praises him for improving so much in a short time. That feat was almost perfectly executed, but it still wasn't enough to overcome Beryl's reflexes. Just then, Henblitz looks over to Kuruni, and he mentions how it takes a lot of guts to suddenly switch weapons like she did, but she shows a lot of promise. And it's really important that the Knight's Order improves his fighting power, so they can go against the group of thieves known as the Dark Hand of Twilight. The Twilight Thieves have recently begun operations in the capital, and they are causing a lot of trouble, so the Royal Guard and Knights Order are investigating. And as soon as they locate the Twilight hideout, they plan to raid the place and apprehend all the thieves. But to be safe, they'll need all the force they can get, and Kuruni is a bit of a powerhouse. Of course, Blitz is sure Beryl would be able to single-handedly take down the Twilight Thieves, but he doesn't want to bother him with boring work like this, so he tells him he can leave all the fighting to the Knights of the Knights Order. But it's not like Beryl wanted to fight anyway. He has never fought against criminals before, and he doesn't plan on starting anytime soon. But he remembers the ring he got off that pickpocket yesterday, and he wonders if it might help with the investigation. However, as soon as Kuruni spots the ring in his hand, she thinks Beryl is planning to give it to someone as a gift, and Blitz agrees with her. Beryl tries to explain that the ring isn't a gift, but before he could say anything, Kuruni tells him he might need to get a bigger ring if he wants to propose to Alucia, because this one looks like it only fit a child. Beryl has no idea where she got the idea that he's going to propose to anyone, but he finally gets a chance to speak and explain that he was targeted by a pickpocket yesterday. He managed to grab her hand before she could steal anything, but she managed to escape because Beryl got startled when she used fire magic on him. Kuruni thinks this whole thing sounds strange because if the girl can use magic, then she wouldn't need to be a pickpocket. Magic is a rare talent, so anyone with magic can join the Magic Institute for free and have all living expenses paid for. Blitz suggests that the girl might have been using a magical accessory to cast the fire, but in any case, he asks Beryl what he plans to do with the ring. Beryl says he doesn't plan on keeping it, and since the ring is most likely stolen, he wants to return it to its rightful owner. If that is the case, then Blitz tells him he can leave the ring at the front desk of the Knights Order, and that's exactly what Beryl does. Now that he has taken care of the ring, Beryl doesn't plan to get involved in this any further. He didn't lose anything to the pickpocket, and he has no intention of tracking her down. But at the same time, the way she looked at him when he caught her doesn't sit right with him. While walking through town, Beryl decides to take a look at the housing market since he can't keep living in an inn forever, but the prices nearly give him a heart attack. He could technically afford it with how much he gets paid by the Knights Order, but it's still a lot of money to spend. Just then, he notices a girl behind him and she seems to be looking for something, so he goes over to see if he can help. But after getting a closer look at her, he realizes it's the girl that tried to rob him last night. He asks her if she happens to be looking for a ring, and after hearing him mention the ring, the girl attacks him because she thinks he took it. But Beryl asks her to please calm down because he doesn't want to cause a scene. Firstly, he tells her he dropped the ring off at the Knights Order front desk, so he doesn't have it anymore, and the girl can't exactly walk into the Knights Order to get it back. Secondly, Beryl asks her if she stole the ring, because it seems odd that she'd go through so much effort to get it back if it wasn't important to her. She tells him she didn't steal the ring, and that's all Beryl needed to hear, so he tells her to come with him so he can get it back with her. Mui is a little hesitant to follow him, but he tells her it will be hard to prove that the ring is hers if she goes by herself. However, if Beryl vouches for her, it shouldn't take long to get it back. Mui reluctantly agrees to follow him, but she makes it clear that she isn't happy about it. After they arrive at the Knights Order HQ, Beryl gets the ring back, but before he gives it to Mui, he says he would like to have a little chat with her. Just then, Alucia comes out, and when she sees Beryl arguing with Mui, the first thought that comes from her mind is that this must be a secret love child that he never talks about, but Beryl immediately denies it. They all head inside so Beryl can explain the whole situation to Alucia, and now that she knows what's going on, she asks Beryl what he wants to do with Mui. Normally, as a knight, it would be Alucia's job to arrest Mui for theft, but Beryl doesn't want to get her in trouble. He asks Mui if she'll stop pickpocketing if he lets her go, but she doesn't answer the question, and just tells him to give the ring back to her. She clearly doesn't intend to stop pickpocketing, but the fact that she didn't lie about it tells Beryl that she's an honest kid at heart. Alucia recalls hearing that Mui used magic against Beryl, so she asks her if she used a magical accessory to do it, or if it was natural. Mui says she did it on her own, so Alucia explains that if she has a talent for magic, then the kingdom will take care of all her needs so she doesn't need to rely on pickpocketing to survive. Mui is starting to open up a little, so she explains that she can't stop because she needs to pay 5 million delk. Her boss told her that if she paid him that amount, then he would use magic to bring her sister back to life. But she doesn't have enough time to earn that money legally, so she turned to crime. Beryl immediately realizes that Mui's boss must be lying to her because bringing people back to life isn't possible. But there's no way she would believe him if he said that right now. Just then, Alucia decides to step out because there's something she needs to check, and in the meantime, Beryl and Mui are left alone. Beryl asks her if she'd like to eat some cookies, and Mui declines, but she's clearly hungry, so he thinks him a good idea. So he leaves for a moment and comes back with a loaf of bread for Mui. As soon as he hands her the bread, Mui starts devouring it. Beryl is glad he ran into her today because he has been worried about Mui ever since he saw that sad look on her face yesterday, so getting the chance to help her out even a little makes him happy. With that said, he has kept her here long enough so he gives Mui's ring back to her. And now that she has what she came for, Mui says she's leaving. However, before she could walk out the door, Lucy barges in because Alucia told her about Mui having magical potential. Lucy introduces herself as the head of the magical corps and invites Mui to join the Magical Institute because magic users are always welcome. However, Mui rejects the offer because she can't earn 5 million dalk at the Magical Institute. Lucy asks Mui what she plans to use all that money for, so Mui explains that she's going to pay a wizard to resurrect her dead sister. But as soon as she says this, Lucy tells her she's being scammed because resurrection magic doesn't exist. However, Mui still insists that her sister can be resurrected because she saw it for herself, or at least that's what she believes, because in her flashback all this so-called wizard actually does is make her sister's corpse move a little, and Mui was so grief-stricken that she immediately believed he could really resurrect her sister. However, the wizard said it would cost 5 million dalk to fully resurrect Mui's sister, so she's been pickpocketing ever since to earn the money. Lucy feels bad that Mui fell for such a sinister trick, but she tells Mui that there really is no such thing as resurrection magic. Mui accuses Lucy of lying, but Lucy points out that she is a well-respected mage who has studied magic for several centuries, so if resurrection magic was a thing, she would know about it long before some random fake wizard would. By this point, Mui is starting to realize that she may have been tricked, so Lucy asks her for the name of the wizard that started all this. Mui asks why she wants to know, so Lucy explains that she plans to confront him and figure out whether he's lying about resurrection magic or not. On the off chance that he is telling the truth, then Lucy promises to personally pay the 5 million dalk to resurrect Mui's sister. But if a man is lying, then that means he has dishonored the soul of Mui's sister, and Lucy refuses to let that slide. Mui informs her that the man's name is Twilight, and that's the name of the leader of the Twilight Thieves, so Lucy asks Mui to lead her to him immediately. Alucia says she wants to come along as well, but having a knight around would draw too much attention, so instead she asks Beryl to come with her. Before long, they arrive at the entrance to Twilight's lair, and Beryl is surprised that a den of thieves is located right off the main road. Beryl is starting to wish he had borrowed a real sword for this fight, but Lucy assures him that with his skills, a wooden sword should be more than enough to handle some bandits. There's no point in waiting any longer, so Lucy blows a hole through the front door and they are immediately confronted by a group of thieves. One of the thieves tries to grab Lucy, but she doesn't have time to deal with losers like him, so she blasts the thief away and asks Beryl to handle the rest while she goes to deal with Twilight. The thieves spot Mui behind Beryl, and they realize she's the one who ratted them out, so one of them tries to attack her, but Beryl swiftly pokes him in the throat. He's only got a wooden sword, so the bandits will most likely survive, but getting hit in the throat with a wooden sword still hurts like hell, so they're starting to hesitate. While Beryl is dealing with everyone upstairs, Lucy heads into the basement to confront Twilight, and as soon as he sees her, he uses a magic accessory to drop ice balls on Lucy. However, Lucy is a master mage, so something like this could never stop her. She melts her way out of the ice, but Twilight has more magic accessories up his sleeve, so he uses some telekinesis magic to pick Lucy up, and Lucy realizes that this is what he must have used to trick Mui. Twilight admits that he used telekinesis to move her sister's corpse and pretended it was necromancy. And he still finds it funny how gullible Mui was to believe he could really resurrect people. He then prepares a fireball in an attempt to finish Lucy off, but Lucy's patience has run out, so she casts a wind spell in front of Twilight and knocks him out with a pressure. Meanwhile, upstairs, Beryl has just finished beating up most of the bandits, but one of them gets back up and starts accusing Mui of being an ungrateful brat after everything Twilight has done for her. But that makes Beryl mad, so he pokes him in the throat again and knocks the dude out. Eventually, Lucy comes out of the basement with Twilight's body, and she orders him to tell Mui the truth unless he wants to get hit with another wind blast. Twilight admits to Mui that he was lying about resurrection magic, and Mui is devastated to hear this because it means her sister is really gone forever. Now that they've taken all the bandits out, Lucy says she's going to go call the Knight's orders so they can arrest Twilight and his crew. Later on, all the bandits have been loaded onto a cart and are going to be hauled off to prison. Alucia thanks Beryl and Lucy for their help, but there's still a lot of investigating to do, since those magic accessories that Twilight was using were way too powerful for someone like him to acquire on his own. That means there must be someone pulling his strings, and they need to find out who that person is. As Twilight and the other bandits are being hauled off, a man watches from the shadows. The cloakman then points his hand at the cart, and suddenly Twilight's body begins to glow from the inside just before he dies a painful death. The cloakman later goes to report to his boss that Twilight has been successfully silenced thanks to the magic device they implanted in him, so there's no risk of their plans getting leaked. The Pope is glad to hear this because he intends to use these corpses that Twilight gathered for him to recreate a miracle with his own hands, and he won't let anything stop him. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.